It happened in a moment so ordinary, I never imagined it could shatter my world. I was sitting in my living room, sipping tea, when my phone buzzed with a new notification. I thought it was just another reminder, or maybe a message from an old friend. But when I pressed play, a voice memo filled the room, Rachel's voice. My only daughter? At first, I felt that familiar comfort in hearing her speak. But then the words hit me like knives. She spoke about me as if I were nothing but a problem to be removed. She mentioned a nursing home cheap, tucked away where I could be placed out of sight. She talked about transferring the deed to my house, making sure I wouldn't notice. And then, almost casually, she and Eric laughed about my life insurance, as if my death could be the solution to their dreams. I froze. My hands trembled so hard I almost dropped the phone. I replayed the message again and again, praying I had misunderstood, hoping maybe it was some cruel joke. But no, the voices were clear, the intention undeniable. My daughter, the one I had carried, raised, and poured my entire life into, was plotting to take everything from me. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. Tears blurred my vision, but they couldn't wash away the truth. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever known. It wasn't just about money or even the house. It was about love, the love I thought was unbreakable. I sat there in silence, the phone still glowing in my hand, feeling as though the ground had disappeared beneath me. How had it come to this? How could the child I once shielded from every storm now be the very storm tearing through my life? And as the night stretched on, grief began to mingle with memory. My mind drifted back to the years when Rachel was little, when I gave everything I had to make sure she never felt unwanted. That's where my story truly begins. When I look back, the truth is, my story as a mother really began the day my husband walked away. Rachel was still so small, too young to even understand what was happening. But I knew in that moment that every responsibility, every dream, every ounce of survival rested on my shoulders alone. I was 19, with no savings, no safety net, and nothing but a second-hand crib I had bought on credit. I promised myself then that no matter how hard it got, Rachel would never feel abandoned. That vow became the rhythm of my life. Those years were heavy. I worked anywhere that would pay me houses, offices, even scrubbing laundry rooms for cash. My hands were often red and raw from bleach and soap, but I carried that exhaustion quietly. Rachel never saw the struggle the way I did. To her, it was just life. For me, it was sacrifice stitched into every single day. I still remember one winter night when the rain soaked through her thin little coat. We didn't have money for a new one, so after she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a candle burning low and stitched the seams back together. The fabric was worn, but the next morning she slipped it on, and her smile told me she felt proud instead of lacking. That's the kind of thing only a mother notices, the way a child carries dignity in small, fragile details. Money was always tight, but I made it stretch. I skipped meals so Rachel could have second helpings. I polished her shoes until they gleamed so she wouldn't feel out of place among classmates who showed up in crisp uniforms and shiny cars. When it came time for college, the costs seemed impossible. $15,000 a year might as well have been a mountain. But I borrowed against the house, sold the only ring I had, and even pawned my mother's sewing machine. Every choice hurt, but seeing Rachel step into opportunities I never had made the pain feel worth it. There were quiet moments of joy too. I can still feel her little arms around my neck, hear her soft voice whispering that I was the best mom in the world. For me, those words healed the bruises of exhaustion. They convinced me that every sacrifice, every skipped meal, every late night with needle and thread was building something unbreakable between us. I truly believed love worked like a circle, that what I gave would someday return. That devotion would come back to me in the form of gratitude, care, maybe even protection when I was old. I thought the bond we shared, forged through years of sacrifice, could not be broken. But sitting here now, I can see how wrong I was. All the nights I gave up sleep to sew, all the hours I bent my back to pay her tuition, all the moments I denied myself so she could have more. They weren't enough to shield me from betrayal. And the first time I realized that, it wasn't through a careless word or a distance growing between us. It was when I saw the truth written in numbers and transactions, in money that slipped from my accounts without my knowing. That was the moment I began to understand how deep the cracks had become. After hearing that voice memo, I couldn't sleep. The words kept echoing in my mind: cheap nursing home, deed transfer, life insurance. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy with disbelief. At some point, a thought struck me: if they were bold enough to talk about taking my home, what had they already done the next morning, with hands that still trembled? I sat at my kitchen table and pulled out a stack of old bank statements. My laptop glowed faintly in the early light as I logged into my accounts. At first, everything looked ordinary: balances, transactions, the same familiar columns. But the more I scrolled, the more small things began to stand out. Withdrawals I didn't remember making, payments to companies I'd never used, a transfer labeled authorized with a date I knew I hadn't been at the bank. I tried to convince myself it was a mistake. Maybe I had forgotten. Maybe I was slipping. But then I saw it. A scanned authorization letter. My signature at the bottom. Only it wasn't my hand. The slant was wrong. The curve of the letters stiff and unnatural. My name was there, but it wasn't mine. A cold wave swept over me. I printed it out, set it next to one of my old checks, and stared at the two side by side. The forgery screamed at me. Someone had gone into my life and stolen not just my money, but my very identity. And then came the sickening clarity: Rachel and Eric. They were the only ones who had been handling my bills recently, insisting they were helping me, taking the stress off my shoulders. I remembered Rachel's soft voice telling me I didn't need to worry at my age. I remembered Eric's comments about upgrading the house, handling the utilities. At the time, I had tried to believe it was kindness. Now I saw it for what it was: a cover. I flipped through more statements, each page tightening the knot in my chest. Over $8,700 gone in less than 6 months. Transfers, payments, withdrawals. Some were small, almost invisible, as if they wanted me to overlook them. Others were bold, thousands at a time. My savings, the little cushion I had built for emergencies, was bleeding away. I sat back, pressing my palms against the table to steady myself. Betrayal had already cut deep when I heard Rachel's words. But this was different. This was proof paper and ink and stolen dollars that my daughter and her husband had been robbing me in secret while smiling across my dinner table. The outrage rose hot in my throat. How could my own child, the one I had sacrificed everything for, reduce me to a signature on a forged form? How long had they been planning this? And if they could do this, what else were they capable of? For a moment, fear paralyzed me. I felt small, cornered, like a rabbit in a trap. But beneath the fear, something else stirred, a steadier, colder determination. They thought I was weak, too old, too trusting to notice. They thought they could strip me of everything and leave me powerless. They were wrong. That morning, staring at the evidence spread across my kitchen table, I realized I couldn't just sit back and wait for their plan to swallow me whole. If they wanted to play games with my life, then I would learn to fight back, quietly, carefully. I began to imagine my next move. The morning after uncovering the forged signatures and missing money, I woke with a different kind of weight in my chest. Fear was still there. Yes, but now it was laced with something sharper. Resolve. If Rachel and Eric thought I would crumble quietly, they didn't know me as well as they believed. I dressed carefully, choosing a crimson jacket that made me feel steady, and walked into my local bank just as the doors opened at 9. The air smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Ordinary and safe. But I knew I wasn't here for routine business. I asked to see Nora, the branch manager, a woman who had known me for years. She greeted me warmly, unaware of the storm I carried inside. I told her I needed every transaction reviewed, every account frozen to outside access, and new accounts opened in my sole name. My voice didn't waver, though my hands still shook as I laid out the printed forgeries. Nora's face darkened as she compared my true signature with the clumsy imitation. She acted quickly, canceling permissions, moving my savings to a fresh account, adding alerts and voice verification. Each keystroke felt like a brick being placed back under my feet. Before leaving, I made one more decision. I changed the beneficiary on my life insurance, removing Rachel's name entirely. Instead, I listed a foundation that helps abandoned seniors. If my daughter hoped to profit from my death, she would find herself empty-handed. That symbolic act felt like drawing a line in stone. But banking protections weren't enough. I knew documents at the county clerk's office had already been touched. That's where Brooke came in, my niece, Rachel's cousin, who worked there as an assistant. For months, she had stopped by with casual smiles and stacks of papers that seemed harmless. Now, I saw them differently. That afternoon, I walked into her office unannounced. My purse carried a small recorder, its red light hidden beneath a scarf. Brooke looked startled to see me. Her hands shuffled nervously over a pile of files, and her voice cracked as she asked what I needed. I smiled, keeping my tone light, but inside, every nerve was alert. I began gently, asking about routine updates. Then, almost casually, I mentioned Rachel's name and the paperwork she had asked Brooke to prepare. The color drained from her face. Her fingers trembled as she pushed a folder slightly out of sight. My heart pounded, but I leaned in, pressing play on the voice memo I had saved. Rachel's cold words spilled softly into the quiet office. Brooke's eyes widened. She stammered, trying to explain, but I stayed calm. I told her I knew about the forged signatures, the false medical notes, the property documents with my name attached. I gave her a choice: help me undo the mess or face exposure. Tears welled in her eyes as she admitted Rachel had promised her money in exchange for cooperation. Piece by piece, she pulled out the trail copies of forged deeds, altered reports, and drafts of guardianship claims. 2 tense hours later, I walked out of that office with a folder heavy in my hands. Proof, not suspicions, not paranoia, evidence. As I stepped into the sunlight, I felt something shift inside me. I was no longer the woman sitting in her kitchen, trembling over a voice memo. I was a strategist now, armed with truth and prepared for battle. Rachel and Eric thought they could strip me of everything quietly. They had no idea the fight was just beginning. And soon, I would be the one to confront them, face to face, with every lie laid bare. The day of reckoning came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. My house smelled faintly of lemon polish and coffee, though my stomach churned too hard to drink a sip. I had arranged everything carefully, the lawyer seated calmly at my dining table. 2 uniformed officers standing just outside view, waiting. I wanted the stage set not for chaos, but for truth. When Rachel and Eric walked through the door, they carried themselves as if nothing had shifted. Rachel tossed her coat across the sofa. Eric wandered toward the fridge, and I watched them with a stillness I don't think they expected. They thought I would greet them with the same timid gratitude I'd shown all my life. But I had learned. I invited them to sit. My voice was steady, even warm, but inside my pulse drummed like a warning bell. They smiled, acting casual, asking about errands, about whether I had looked into the nursing homes they had suggested. That word nursing home stabbed through me, but I did not flinch. Instead, I slid a folder across the table. Inside lay the forged documents, a power of attorney with my name, a deed transferring my house into their hands, even medical notes declaring me unfit. Their eyes flickered. Rachel's lips parted in denial. Eric leaned forward too quickly, insisting it was all a mistake. I didn't respond. I simply pressed a button on my phone, and the voice memo began to play. Rachel's own words filled the room, the cold plan to place me in the cheapest facility, to strip me of my home, to wait for the payout from my insurance. The silence after her voice ended was heavier than stone. Eric's face flushed red. He sputtered excuses, tried to point at Brooke as if she were the mastermind. But then I laid Brooke's written statement on the table, signed and notarized, confessing the part she had played and the bribes she had accepted. Each piece of paper fell like a hammer. Rachel's composure cracked. Her voice grew frantic. Her hands shook as she reached for me, insisting she loved me, that I was twisting things, that she had only been trying to protect me. But I had lived too many years sacrificing for her to mistake greed for love. I looked straight into her eyes, my own voice calm and cold, and for the first time, I saw fear in hers. The officers stepped closer, waiting for my signal. My lawyer folded his hands, silent but steady at my side. For a moment, all that could be heard was the ticking of the kitchen clock, each second stretching out like a lifetime. There I was, in the very house they had plotted to steal, holding every truth in my hands. My daughter and son-in-law sat unraveling before me, stripped of their lies, their schemes exposed. And yet, as their pleading eyes darted toward me, I realized the hardest choice was still ahead. Would I press charges and see them taken away in handcuffs, or would I hold back, even after everything, because of the blood that tied us? That silence hung heavy, marking the threshold of the next battle. The battle not just for my home, but for my dignity, my very sense of self. Rachel was the first to break the silence. Her voice was sharp, desperate, insisting that I was confused, that I wasn't thinking clearly, that maybe my mind wasn't as strong as it used to be. Eric jumped in, his tone oily and practiced, trying to convince the lawyer and officers that I was unstable, that they had only been stepping in out of concern. Hearing them twist my love, my trust, into accusations against me was almost worse than the betrayal itself. They wanted to steal not just my home, but my sanity. For a moment, their words pressed against my chest like a heavy stone. I thought about the nights I stayed awake worrying about bills, about Rachel's future, about whether my sacrifices had been enough. I remembered stitching her dresses by candlelight, skipping meals so she could eat, pawning my wedding ring to cover her tuition. Could all of that really be rewritten by their lies? Then my lawyer quietly opened a second folder. Inside was the independent psychological evaluation I had undergone just weeks before. Every line confirmed what I already knew, that I was of sound mind, sharp, capable of making decisions for myself. He read the key findings aloud, calm and precise. While Rachel and Eric's faces paled, their last defense crumbled in front of them, and for once, they had no words. The officers turned to me. Their question was simple, but it carried the weight of my entire life. Did I want to press charges? I felt the room tighten. My hands rested on the table, steady now, no longer trembling. My heart ached with the memory of the little girl I once carried on my hip, the daughter I believed would always stand beside me. And yet before me sat a woman who had plotted to discard me, who had turned my sacrifices into weapons against me. In that moment, I realized this battle wasn't just about protecting my house or my savings. It was about protecting the dignity I had nearly lost when I first heard that voice memo. It was about showing myself and every person who has ever been betrayed that our worth doesn't vanish because others fail to see it. I lifted my head, meeting the officer's eyes. My voice was clear, unwavering. I told them I wanted to proceed. Rachel gasped. Eric muttered curses under his breath, but I no longer heard them as family. I heard them as the people who had tried to erase me. And in that single choice, I reclaimed myself. The tension didn't vanish, but it transformed. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing tall, not as a victim, but as a woman who had chosen to fight back. And that choice, more than anything, marked the true turning point of my story. The courtroom didn't echo with drama when it ended. It closed with the quiet scratching of pens across paper. Rachel and Eric sat stiffly as they signed the confession my lawyer had prepared, admitting to every forged document, every lie they had spun to strip me of my dignity. They were ordered to return the money they had stolen, every last cent. Watching their signatures appear on those pages felt like breathing freely for the first time in months. Justice didn't roar. It whispered, steady and undeniable. I walked out not triumphant, but lighter. My name had been restored. My mind had been declared sound. The shadow of their betrayal no longer clung to me. I realized that regaining my dignity was worth far more than any dollar figure. For so long, I had feared being erased, made small and powerless. But now, I stood taller than I had in years. Still, the house that had once been my sanctuary carried a different weight. Every corner held memories of raising Rachel birthday candles on the kitchen table, her first steps in the hallway, the way I had painted her room sky blue. But those same walls had also witnessed whispered schemes against me. It no longer felt like home. So I made the decision that startled even myself. I sold it. Signing those papers felt like closing the cover on a book that had been read too many times. I took the proceeds and chose something smaller, something new, a senior community where laughter floated down the hallways, where neighbors knocked on doors with casseroles, where friendships sprouted over bingo nights and gardening. It was there that I found a different kind of healing. I began volunteering to organize activities for residents who felt isolated. I sat with widows and widowers, listened to stories that mirrored my own heartbreak, and in giving them comfort, I found my own purpose bloomed again, not from sacrifice this time, but from connection. life had shifted. I no longer lived under the illusion that love would always be repaid with gratitude. Instead, I lived with the understanding that betrayal can break you, but it can also reveal a strength you never knew was there. As I looked around my new home, filled with light and the hum of shared laughter, I knew I had reclaimed more than my finances. I had reclaimed myself. And that journey, the loss, the betrayal, the fight, and the renewal had given me a lesson worth sharing. Because if there's one truth I carried into this new chapter, it's this: even when those closest to us turn against us, dignity is something no one can steal unless we allow it. And that realization, more than anything, was my true victory. And with that peace, I was ready to share the lesson this story had etched into my life. When I look back on everything that happened, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the fight to reclaim my dignity, I realize something I wish I had known sooner. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people you trust the most. And while that truth hurts, it doesn't mean your story ends there. It means you get the chance to write a new chapter, one where you stand up for yourself and protect the life you've built. For a long time, I believed that love meant endless sacrifice, even at the cost of myself. But what I've learned is that forgiveness does not mean letting someone keep hurting you. You can let go of bitterness while still setting boundaries. In fact, protecting yourself is one of the purest forms of self-love, and it teaches others how to treat you. Resilience doesn't have an expiration date. At 66, I discovered a strength I never thought I had. If I can rebuild my life after being betrayed by my own child, then anyone listening can find the courage to face what feels impossible. The pain may bend you, but it doesn't have to break you. So my message is simple: hold on to your dignity. No matter what, guard your heart, your home, your peace. And remember, boundaries are not walls to shut people out. They are doors that let in only those who truly respect and cherish you. If my story touched you, I hope you carry its lesson into your own life. And if you've ever faced betrayal, know that you're not alone. Share this video, leave a comment, tell your story. Because when we speak our truth, we not only heal ourselves, we light the way for someone else.